Hey, what's going on? Ronin Man here. Today I'm going to talk about the institution of marriage. And it's from a perspective that I guarantee you have never heard before. No matter what podcast you listen to or what book you read. And I believe that I've figured out some fundamental truths about how marriage evolved and the environment that marriage evolved in, that the environment that humanity was in at the time, and why now you have so many people not wanting to marry. And of course, there are new things, things like the family courts, which I will not talk about in this episode. But that's for another episode. Good topic, another episode. This one is, okay, the best way to start this is talk about the woman cooking, roasting, the pot roast. Okay, so a lot of guys know this story. So she cuts off the ends of the pot roast and she puts it in the pan and she cooks it. Her daughter looks at it and goes, "Mommy, why do you cut the end of the pot roast off?" And she's like, "That's just what you do, I mean, let's face it, the end of the pot roast is kind of ugly, right? It's not pretty like when you cut, right? So anyway, it kind of logically, to some mindset, would kind of make sense. But she says, "Why do you cut the end off?" And she goes, "I don't know." She said, "Well, that's just the way you do it. It was the way you cook a pot roast." So she asked the grandmother, and she said, in the other room, she goes, "Why do you cut the end of the pot roast off?" And then she said, "Well, that's always the way you cook a pot roast. You always cut off the end first." And so then your great-grandmother was still alive. So she said, she goes to the hospital and says, "Grandmother, why do you cut the ends of the pot roast off? Why do you do that?" And she goes, "Oh, we did that because our pan was too small." And, that is a great story because, a lot of times people poo-poo these type of things. But this really is a lot of the situation that humanity's in now, is that a lot of our institutions and the way we do things were based on situations that existed at the time. And they don't exist now. And so what happens when institutions fall apart is everybody blames, and there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of personalizing things, where you're saying, "Oh, she's not doing that. He's not doing that." And not looking at the reality of the underlying, basically the foundation, of institutions. So today I'm going to talk about marriage. And I guess the first thing to know about marriage is that marriage is not as old as you think. Cavemen did not get married. There was no ceremony for marriage. Marriage ceremonies is one of the most, it's one of the most, photographed, documented things in the world. There's, people might lose all their pictures, but they have their wedding photos. It's the way people are. And so in the old days, my relatives were iron ore miners. And they have very few pictures, all of them, because they didn't have any money. And so the only pictures they have are special events. That's it. And special events for them was totally different than now. There wasn't a special event all the time. Very, very few special events. Life was very hard for them. And there's just almost no pictures. So, but if you look at weddings, they have a lot of pictures, right? And so if marriage was older, we would certainly have records and cave paintings and things like that. But we don't. So cavemen did not marry, and that's to the best of our knowledge. And they documented a lot of things on those caves, though. That's the funny thing, It didn't take money. You could just draw on the cave wall, right? As long as it survived and lasted, we have that memory. And a lot of caves got sealed off, and a lot of those paintings, they lasted a long time. Those drawings, So we do have a pretty good record of what people valued, right, in the old days. So marriage is not, in the end, the caveman days, let's just put in simple terms, let's just say 100,000 years ago. And the dates are always changing. Some people say that, Homo sapiens evolved as much as 200,000 years ago now. And other people have different opinions. They're dating rocks, they're dating everything. Things are constantly based on discoveries, okay, not based on political power, based on discoveries, new discoveries of things that survived all that time. It's hard to find as they come up that things do change. So we got to be ready for that. Don't throw up your arms. Oh, nothing's true because they changed. It's like, no, that's the whole purpose. They're trying to find a very difficult piecing together history. History of the universe is very difficult. That's why we sent up the new James Webb telescope in space, and that's why we had all kinds of fancy telescopes since Galileo's time, is to figure things out and try to piece together things. So marriage is fairly new, and it involved an environment that's very different than today. I think everybody could agree to that, is that things have really changed. And I noticed a lot of people, and even myself included, when we don't understand something, we tend to blame individuals. He did that or she did that. But if you look at the underlying trends or what's going on or what was the environment that happened in, often it's much easier to understand. And I think marriage is definitely one of those things. A lot of things that people in the manosphere don't talk about is that women, they'll say, oh, men are not going to marry. This is a common thing people will say. And so women will finally change and they'll get their act together and, realize that they want to be married. But that's not going to happen. And that is not going to happen. What will happen instead is what's happening. In that what's happening is that women are not wanting to get married. Just when everybody thought, now men don't want to get married. It's a huge thing now. So what was the reaction of women? The reaction of women was wanting basically babies that were, DNA altered. So, super kids, synthetic wombs, these are the reaction to men not wanting to have children. So the reaction isn't what we think. And so it really benefits men in particular to understand the world. I think this is one of men's, I've talked about this in one other episode when I did it in New Jersey, but it's just essential for us as men to understand the world. And that's really what I'm trying to do with this one. I really want you to come away with this one with a new understanding and a sympathy for people, men and women, because we are acting in a very logical way based on our situation. And women are very much doing that. And that's the difficult thing to take. And that's the difficult thing to accept for society as things change. And they change based on different needs and different situations. So, okay, let me just go, I'm going to a little bit jump around to get to the final. So, and they're all very important. Money is one of the big things. So I grew up without money. A lot of people know. I grew up in a trailer park. My personality, my fundamental personality grew up with a family that had no money. And we lived in a trailer park. We went to small towns. Those small towns didn't even have stores. They just had like a gas station. And, in the desert, we did go to places like Boulder, but we always lived Nevada. We always lived way outside of town and near the job that my dad was working on. And we lived all over the place. And it was just basically places that my dad made freeways and stuff. So it was by definition in the middle of nowhere in the desert, because that's really what his area was. And so I grew up in a very simple way. I didn't have toys. Me and my brother would make things out of wood. We would climb trees. I don't want to, emotionalize or anything, but that's what we did. We didn't have things that a lot of people have. I was talking to a friend of mine on Saturday. Or Sunday, we went up mountain biking. We were talking about mountain bikes and we're talking about bikes in general. He said, I was lucky. I had all the good toys and everything. And I looked at him for a second. I'm like, oh man, I would have been so jealous, because I never had the cool toy. I never had the cool clothes. I wore tough skins from Sears, right? And they were hand-me-downs. So, that was they were tough, they were good for boys, and they were very unfashionable. And usually didn't fit right. But anyway, that's what I had, right? And so, don't want to belabor that point. But the key thing is, I didn't come from money. But what's very interesting about my story is somebody close to me, very, very close. I don't want to get into details. Please don't dig. It's none of anybody's business. The lesson is what we're after here. So let's get into the lesson. What's the lesson I learned? I learned more than you could have ever imagined when I was around somebody who got wealthy. You will learn from these stories coming up, even if the rest of the marriage thing is not interesting. It really turned my head around because I thought I knew about life. I understood why people do things, why I do things. And when I was around money, when I say money, I don't mean small money. Okay, I don't mean like $1 million or even $10 million. In the category of person I'm talking about, $10 million is like the poorest rich person, basically. They don't have any power in society. They're just people that have money to spend, and they don't have to worry about earning, right? Because $10 million is kind of the limit where you're not going to lose it. You're going to somehow keep that money, as long as you don't, obviously, gamble it on one thing. But in general, people with $10 million, it's pretty much been proven statistically, they never lose it all. So $10 million is kind of that sweet spot where, if you are trying to get that spot where you're like, I got enough money where I don't have to worry about anything, 10 million, that's it, right? Once you get that, you're done. Anything above that doesn't really bring any happiness. But we're not talking about 10 million right now. We're talking about people in the hundreds and hundreds of millions and even in the billions. Okay. Now, what did I learn from somebody very close to me who grew up very, very poor when they got into this category? What did I learn? I learned a lot. Oh, man. One thing I learned, it was painful, but I learned that the person who got rich looked at life differently. And it was my reaction, which I didn't show and I luckily didn't act upon, was I was pissed. And I think what that is that feeling is when somebody close to you changes. A friend, he changed. He got famous and he changed. And what a lot of people saying that are saying is, I don't understand why he did that. There's no sympathy for the guy. The feeling is that he got money and all of a sudden he's an ass, right? That's generally the kind of, and you can spout that off in podcast episodes on TV and movie themes, and everybody that's poor will agree with you, is that rich people, they just become jerks. I think the difference is, and I think this is a fundamental kind of foundation of this episode, is that it's not true, is that their priorities change, and our lack of awareness of why we do things like that roast is what the true cause of the problem is. We don't realize that a lot of our institutions, behaviors, traditions, habits, even manners are based on an assumption that there's not enough money to go around. And so the best way is to do a certain, have a family where two people work together. They work hard. She does the house. He works his ass off in the field. They save money. She raises the kids. She makes the clothes. This was the original idea of marriage. And in that period, it worked really well. It worked really well. And a lot of guys will say, well, modern women changed. I don't think modern women change as much as the environment changed. And the environment is, when you understand it, it will free you. You guys don't know the freedom that will come from listening to this whole thing and comprehending it. It will allow you to see the world more realistically and with more love and understanding, and also to be able to make better choices for your future. And I think you might even have some huge revelations about yourself. And that was what I chose to do. When this person got very rich around me, I chose not to do the reaction where, she's this, blah, 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 and then spread that around. Because that actually is what I saw everybody around me doing. So I'm not talking shit here. I'm serious. This is people's reaction. Is what the truth is, they don't understand what a rich person faces. And a rich person really takes the red pill. When I say rich, I mean that person like in the hundreds of millions. They realize that, well, first they don't change at all. They go buy a bunch of Armani, they go buy a bunch of crap, and then they realize, oh, geez, it doesn't affect their finances at all, but it's like they kind of realize things. It's like, oh, that didn't really make me happy. And it takes a few years. Some people never change. There are people from the Great Depression in the United States. Most of them passed away now, but they never changed. They were always the same, and they always saved everything. There was a guy famously who would never cross his legs because it wears your jeans out faster. And he was like, don't cross your legs because you'll notice, those white spots on your knees, those are because you're crossing your legs all the time. And he always did everything to maximize everything in his life. And the truth was, the guy was probably the only guy in the world doing this research. And you could look at his genes and say, this dude's actually fucking right. He actually knew a lot of things that most people just take for granted. There's, genes wear out, right? He knew how they wear out and why. And he had tested it, right? So some people never change, and they take pride in it, right? And that's fine. Other people, when they become very, very wealthy, they make mistakes, but it dawns on them over time that they're making a lot of mistakes. So let me give an example. So I was trying to help somebody. Okay, the person who became very rich in my life. They had done something for me, or I can't remember if they did. Anyway, I just felt like they were moving to Japan, and I thought, okay, I'm a Japan expert. I can do everything for them, just like I do for my clients, and I can just help them a lot and make it easy on them. And so I tried. I was like, hey, and they knew. They had been to Japan. They knew I was an expert, and they also knew we were very close, right? Very, very close. And they never called on me for any advice. And it really hurt me because I was like, man, going to Japan is not easy, right? Now, I did advise in one key business decision, which it changed the course of history for this company in a very good way. I don't know if I want to go into that sometime or not, but it is a very interesting story. Yeah, I think I will. But give me a few years because I want to wait till things kind of settle down in another area of my life. The one thing about telling true stories that are sensitive is that people can hear them and they don't like it. So I want to strike that balance of not alienating everybody in my life, but being a creator and a writer. And if you look at any writer, any great writer, they always write about people near them because those are the people they know. They write about the quirks of these people. They write about the hypocrisy. They write about the greatness. They write about the things of the people around them because anything else is just hearsay. And great writers, they don't go on hearsay. They look at the world and they document it and they write about it. And that's what makes it interesting. And they find new ways of looking. That's what I'm trying to do in this episode too, by the way. Real stories, real events. So that was one thing, is they never asked me for advice about moving to Japan. And I was like, come on, I really knew what I was talking about. And I was the guy that everybody went to, but they would not ask me a single question. And it drove me insane. I'm like, why the fuck would they, of all people, not ask me for fucking help? I know they're making mistakes. That's stupid. That will cause that. And I said something once. I tried to give advice to this person, and they said, well, we have a consultant who is a relocation consultant, and basically we have her on retainer. We just call her whenever we have a question about something in Japan. So you don't have to worry about it. We got it covered. She's got a team, and, you don't have to worry about it. But to me, I tell you, I was really hurt because as human beings, we don't have that much to offer. We have certain things we offer and a lot of things we don't. And the one thing I definitely had to offer, I knew for a fact, well, I can't say a fact because I didn't know who the person was, but everybody came to me for advice. So I knew my advice was probably even better than this professional on this topic because I had done it myself. And this person was Japanese. So I knew they hadn't done it themselves. Anyway, I had to finally concede. And it was hard on my ego, it was hard on my logic, it was hard on my brain, and it was hard on my heart because I wanted to help. I wanted to be there. I wanted to give something of value. I knew I couldn't give money to them, but I could give real value in the form of knowledge and help them to not make mistakes and to look good and live the way they wanted, because I knew them the best too. So I knew exactly what it was that would make them happy. So I had such a special position, and I cared. Like a person that's paid, they don't really care, right? I actually cared. So I was for a long time, I couldn't understand. I was hurt. But this ended up teaching me a great lesson, you guys, and I want to pass that on. And what really spurred it on was I kind of wouldn't let it go. I'm like trying to give advice, and they just don't care. They're just not listening. And it was pissing me off. And then at one point, I remember they needed a ride somewhere. This is before Uber. They needed a ride somewhere. And I said, hey, I'll just go pick you up and we'll take you over there. And the person came up with a million excuses not to let me pick them up. Now, of course, there's cabs and everything, but my car was bigger and it fit in the things they needed and this and that. And it was where the tipping point happened for me, is where I relented and I laughed at myself. And also I learned a great lesson that I want to pass on. So I just was kind of a little bit pushy. I was trying to kind of like offer, and they were like not having it. And I knew it, right? But I couldn't figure out why. See, for me, I don't mind being wrong. I think there was some comments recently. It's like, he doesn't like being, it's not that I don't like being wrong. It's that I'm human. So it takes me time to digest sometimes. To change, you need to digest truth. Okay, we all do. And sometimes I just need that lesson. I don't need someone to bombard me or berate me or put me down, belittle me. What I need is that one lesson. And once I got that, bam, I'm done. I got it. It's like gold in my bag now. It's my tool. It's in my jacket, right? It's my Swiss Army knife. I got a new blade on there, right? So what happened was I couldn't understand why she didn't want me to pick her up. And I left and I went home to myself. And I thought, why would she not do that? And suddenly I realized that it was like, duh, but I just didn't see it. I realized that she would rather buy a car, okay, with her credit card, or have her, she has a person that manages her money, like old big time money. They don't manage their own money. They have like these institutions that help them to manage. And real wealth advisors, not scammers selling insurance wrappers. I'm talking about people that are managing old money for families that have a lot to lose. And these are kind of like part of a cadre of essential people for wealthy families. And they're very highly valued, and they're super important because they kind of handle the hard part of money, which is keeping it. Making it is one thing, but keeping it. They're part of the keeping it brigade, and they are part of old money, and they're accepted too. They're not seen as workers. They're very important, right? Traditionally. Okay, so I realized that this person would be better off just telling her wealth advisor to buy a car, right? Just buy a car and have it at the airport. They pick it up, drive it to their house, put a note on it and say, here's a free car if you want it. Keys are in the car. The deed is signed. You can just go register it under your own name. Don't worry about it. Please take this out of our driveway whenever you have time. And thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy the car. That was the kind of money they had at this point. And so why would they not want my help? Why? Because of who I was at the time. I was working my way up. And they knew that. They knew I was a good person. Okay, this person knows me. But at the same time, they knew my situation. I was like earning my way up. I was working. I had my head earning company going. I also had a toy company. I was manufacturing in China. I was strapped for cash. I might ask for a loan. I might ask for help. I might ask for an introduction, because they have friends like Jeff Bezos and what's his name? Microsoft, Bill Gates. That's the kind of friends and neighbors they had when they were back in the States. So I wanted, introductions to help my business, right? I didn't really want money. I wanted introductions. And, they didn't want to give it, And I totally understand now. And I laugh at myself for this period of my life. I just didn't understand where they're coming from. And I didn't know myself. I mean, I was a hungry dog at the time, and I wasn't going to use them. But I mean, man, I was looking out for my own business self at the time. And I wanted to make a bunch of money, and I wanted to get secure. And I definitely had some insecurities around money. I grew up poor. And part of the reason why I'm talking about this is because I've worked through these issues, and I'm comfortable with myself now. And I laugh at myself, my old self. I hope when you listen to this, you can laugh at yourself too, because we all are a product of our environment. This is what a lot of the manosphere does wrong, is they don't realize that they're part of the current environment. And I'm going to talk about what that means later. So anyway, I laughed at myself, and I started to make it a practice for myself to study really wealthy people. I shouldn't say rich, because this is not rich. This is like extremely wealthy, upper crust. I wanted to study them from the friendships that I gained in my life. Connections through these people that were close to me, and also people that I just came across in my business and friends I made and this and that. And, I think the lessons I learned are one of the key things why I'm able to make friends with wealthy people, because wealthy people, they know where you're coming from. They know your struggles because they've done it themselves. They know. It's obvious. It's like a girl. Even if they haven't done it themselves, it doesn't matter. It's like a super hot girl. She knows when you're trying to impress her. Okay, guys? They know. Okay. It's obvious. Your voice inflects up. You're like, how are you? You're not like, hey man, what's up? You're just kind of like, everything in your body leans back. You give it away, right? So they know, not that you're going to take advantage of them, but they know that you're showing signs that are not good for them, and it's not worth the risk. To a very wealthy person, they just don't want risk. That's the main thing. They just don't want any risk. They're like, nah, I might have, might not, but you know what? What's the point? I don't need it. I can just buy a car and just drop it off. And I think now it was smart of them not to take my help, because if they would have, I would have been very middle classy. Like, that was kind of what I was at the time. I would have been like, hey, I did a favor for you, you do a favor for me, that kind of thing. People don't realize how demanding they are of others. It's like, when you're talking to a wealthy person, you don't know, trust me, what an introduction means, especially to a high value person. It could really devastate them and their relationships with their other friends. It is important, okay? It's not like a friend, like you have friends, you introduce people. When you're talking about a very, very, very wealthy person, and they put their stamp of approval on it, they have more to lose, okay? A lot more. And if you understand that, that's partly why I made the friendship episode. I don't ask for things from people. Rich people, they know I don't want anything from them. I just want to hang out. That's it. And have fun. They even try to give me stuff I don't take. I'm not interested. I'm not there for that, because I know better. And also I know it would ruin everything. And I know what they want. They want to have fun. Rich people want to have a good time. They want somebody around them who's optimistic, someone who they call and they're up for shit, and they're having a good time. They've taken care of their health. They're in good position. Basically, in the be ready for shit episode, like they're ready for stuff. They're ready to go, and mentally, physically, they have enough money to do stuff. They don't have to be rich at all. They can be very poor, but as long as they are self-sufficient, it's good enough for any good wealthy person. A lame wealthy person, that's another story. But a good wealthy person, and there's a lot of them, don't just write people off because they have money. Men or women. So anyway, so that taught me about money. And so money, okay, so then I realized, then my other realization about money, which is interesting, was I started to date. Okay, my Sugar Mama episode, I talked about dating wealthy women. And as I dated wealthy women, it was really interesting, because that episode is the most misunderstood Ronin Man video of all time. I was really saying that these people have different needs, and you have a chance to kind of what I'm saying today a little bit, although I didn't go into it as much, but is you need to change yourself and overcome your own selfishness and lack of vision, and understand other people's needs in order to provide value to them, and then they want you around. That's how you get a woman with money that wants to be with you. She knows you know the game. You're not going to embarrass her. And you're not there for the money, okay? That's the key thing. You're not there for the money. for me, it's an interesting specimen. Whenever people are totally different, it's like I get a chance to be in a different world, and for me, that's a learning opportunity. I enjoy it. I lived in the third world a lot, very poor people. I lived in a dirt house, dirt floor, with a fire in the middle. Believe it or not, I lived in a house like that, where you can't even breathe when you're cooking. It's terrible for your lungs. I climbed coconut trees to get water. I was in India for 6 months, in the poorest parts of India on a motorcycle. I went all over the world. I've been in the third world a lot, all over Mongolia and Russia in the 80s and Western China. And I've been near Pakistan border, and I've been to so many third world countries. So don't misunderstand me. I want to learn from both. I learned a lot from third world, a lot, probably more from the third world than I did from the first world or from wealthy people. But anyway, it's still interesting. It's kind of like I love a lot of music, like different types, but I also like classical music. And I think wealthy people are more like classical music. There's you don't listen to them that often. There's not that much. But when you do, it's very peaceful. And it's very nice. It's a very interesting and enjoyable part of your life. So I recommend having as broad an experience in life as possible. So back to marriage and wealthy people. Wealthy people, once they've learned they're wealthy, and that often takes a few years, and like I said, some wealthy people never learn, like the people in the Depression. But once they learn that, here's one thing they learn, is that the institution of marriage is mainly about money. In the old days, women married for money because they couldn't get a job. Now that women can get jobs, they don't want to marry as much. That's the hard, cold truth. You want to know why your girlfriend doesn't want to marry? Does she have a good job and money? Does she have a good education, a lot of options? Listen, you can't blame her for having options. She has options. I will tell you what happens to you when you have options. For me, I was always good with girls. I always had game. I wasn't like a lot of the pickup artists I was the worst guy. I was 5,000 pounds overweight. I was the stupidest fucking guy. I had no fashion. And then I learned, and now I'm slick as... That's all bullshit. I lost 800 pounds. Listen, I was always pretty good. I was always pretty social, so you guys might guess. But that only carried me so far. And I had to be finally in an environment where I was in serious demand, like a rock star. For a period of time, for a short period of my life, let's say 10 years, where I had choice. And what happened to me was scary. It was scary to me. It was terrifying. Is all of a sudden, so when I started, I had a bunch of girls. And mainly one was a good girl. And the other one was maybe I had one ugly one. Then I had one older one. And I had, one girl I didn't like that much. And I had this. I had one that was just had some annoying things. And I put up with stuff, and I got a bunch of girls. Then I realized, gosh, I have this one really nice girl. I thought I wanted some more nice girls, so I started to thin out the herd, increase the quality of girls. And finally I reached a point where I had a bevy of young, I'm talking from 18 to 24, hot, educated, classy girls that could play the piano. They knew art, they knew music, they had traveled, they were fun to talk to, they had humor. They fucked like rabbits, because anybody that didn't was out. They had to be very sensual in the bed, and that's hard to find, that combination, but it does exist. And I had actually got to the point where I had a bunch of those girls, and I remember I just had too many girls at one point. It just got out of control. I remember I tried to go over 7 regulars. I would meet each one of them once a week, and then I got to 9 regulars, and I had to do 2 of them in one day, and it was hard to schedule, and my energy, because I like to give girls a good bone. And I need at least 24 hours to really give, my all to a girl. Where, I don't mean one, I mean a real love-making, fucking sensual, extravaganza. That's what I want to give. That's what I demand of myself. I demanded that. And I was into that. I wanted to give that. I wasn't I'll just pump and dump. I have this one. No, man, I really took pride that I was a good lovemaker. And I wanted to just do it good with each one. And I found ways I could get myself to do it. And that's what Spot On Sean was asking about. I found ways to trick myself into getting really turned on by every girl as they came over. But when I got to 9, that was too many. I couldn't do that. And I could offer low quality time to them. I could give them a bone once a week because I found that was the minimum. You can't have a girlfriend if you don't bone her once a week. Long distance relationships are not real. They're not relationships. You got to bone a chick once a week if you want a relationship. And as soon as that stops, you're not in a relationship. That's not an intimate relationship. That's a friendship. That's something else. Okay. I shouldn't say friendship because it's something else. It's not an intimate relationship. Don't fool yourself. But what happened to me is I got scared of myself because I remember this at the peak. There was this one girl and she was like, this girl's got everything. She's like sweet. She was 22. She was bubbly. She was a great fuck. She really was a good fuck. And she was always had a big smile for me. And she was like fun to be around. She always like teased me in a good way. She had a good sense of humor. She liked to play practical jokes. She was a character, she had personality, spunk. And I had to blow her off because I just had too many girls and I had to get rid of two. And I remember like basically dumping her. And I remember like feeling so bad because I thought, God, this girl's like, and she was really depressed about it too. And I felt bad. I was like, God, I'm a jerk. Like, fuck, this girl's so nice. Any guy would just love to marry this girl. And she wanted to get married. She was a good girl. You know what I mean? She had everything. She would have married young. She was so cool. But I just had too many hot girls like that, and you get to the point where it's like she's just one of the other roses, and so I was like, and that's what choice gives you. And so women listening, you're like, oh, he's a jerk. It's not about being a jerk. That's what I'm trying to say. Is women are jerks and men are jerks. It's all about choice and environment. So you act a certain way because of the options you have. You think it's because you're not a jerk, but actually it's because you don't have the options. As soon as you have the options, things change. And that is the social transformation that is natural and healthy. And like I said, people that don't change, it's not healthy. The people that were from the Depression and never changed, they never enjoyed their money. They never learned that there was different ways of thinking. And they could never see that it was based on an environment. Now, of course, if you don't have enough money, if you got only like say 10 mil, you can't live like a wealthy guy because you're not a wealthy guy. You're a rich guy. So I'm not saying live above your means. What I'm saying is live within your means, but your means are now basically unlimited. Once you have a certain amount of money, you just can't spend it. Like I'm telling you, you can't. Like you'll just have a bunch of houses you didn't know about, or you'll buy a stock and it goes up. You can try to lose the money, but you can't once you get over a certain amount, unless you put it all in one thing, which the wealth managers never do, right? So you basically can never lose your money. You can lose the family fortune and leave nothing to your kids, or very little, right? But you can't lose it. That's what I'm talking about here. So when you get to, so let's see my train of thought here. I'm trying to put a lot of ideas here. So, oh gosh, I totally lost my train of thought. So the rich people, what they do, what do they get married for? They get married not for the reasons you get married for. Marriage is based, the institution of marriage, by and large, is based on need, as I said in the beginning. It's based on money. And it's not because women are greedy. It's because they didn't have a job. They couldn't get a job. And guys could get jobs. And they needed to eat, okay? It's very simple. Marriage was based on necessity. And before jobs, it was based on necessity. The man tilled the field, the woman took care of the house and kids. And that was the need, okay? Now, as that need's gone away, we blow it off. Like, oh, that need's not there. And now everybody has money. You get money from the government. A lot of people, they're not working like they used to. It was unheard of when I was young for a man of working age to not be working. I mean, hippies that didn't work. Actually, most hippies fucking worked, by the way. I was in California. A lot of hippies worked. I saw them leave to shitty jobs. And the only ones who didn't were selling weed. So people worked, right? They had to fucking work. If you were a man of working age, you worked, okay? It's the way it was. There's that old guy in the Middle East. They asked him what he thought of 9/11 right after it. And he goes, they told him all the values of civilization class. He goes, the guy who couldn't understand, he's like, when I was young, we had to work. We didn't have time for this shit. And it was really funny because I was just like somebody would say here. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. This guy, he's dressed, obviously like he could be mistaken for one of these guys. And he's like, these kids, they don't have any, and Bin Laden was rich. All these guys, so it all changes when you have money. Not a coincidence that Bin Laden was from a wealthy family. He saw life differently. He saw the things he could get differently. He saw his values were different. And so he started a major movement, right? And it was not because of him. It was because there was a tipping point where time had come. People were getting more wealthy. A lot of the clash of religions can actually be, you can narrow it down to a class of money and economics and basically changes in economic status and needs of people. Okay, that is what really drives most changes. Marriage is the best example. So women don't need to get married anymore. You want to see, and I'm not talking from the greedy perspective. This is not what people are like gold diggers. No, look, man. It was all based on need in the beginning. It was based on need. Okay, a man needed sex. Okay, men need sex. We can do without it. We can live physically, but it harms us. Harms our testosterone levels, our confidence. For all intents and purposes, men need sex, okay? It's a need. Okay, so now today we have found ways to satisfy that need that are just beyond the imagination of the old days. But in those days, it was like you needed a woman, basically. Yeah, you needed a woman, and so the woman needed the man needed the woman. That was the core thing, okay? And the only marriages basically you see working these days are based on things in the modern era. So you see girls from the third world marrying. Why? They're in the same position as women were hundreds of years ago. They need stability, okay? You can't just get a middle-class job in India. It ain't that easy. Well, if you're in Mumbai, you can get a job that pays. But you got to be educated, and to get educated, you got to be from a family that has money, and there's a lot of things that have to connect for you to get. Or you have to write an essay that gets famous, you have to pass a test. There are things that make it extremely difficult to rise through the castes of society, whether you're in India with a caste society or you're in another country with a caste society based on wealth and power. Okay, you notice I don't say race, because it's all, look at wealth and power and you will understand who has the money, who's doing the stuff, right? How does it work? Okay, look beyond women, look beyond race, look at the underlying factors that influence you most of all. This is what's going to help you in life. Getting angry does not help you. Although anger is a natural emotion and you will have anger, and I don't mean that. I mean, you know what I mean? Just being an angry guy. But being angry is healthy, okay? Don't get me wrong. We all get angry. It's a reaction to something we don't like. Now, often we are embarrassed about it later because we realize, as I did in this episode I'm talking about, back when I was in my 20s, but sometimes we need that. We need to be angry and it come out, and then we're like, okay, now I see myself better. I see the reality of myself. I see the reality of the world. Okay. And we make changes. Where if you held the anger in, you often wouldn't learn, because then you didn't express it. You didn't look dumb, and you didn't have that social pressure that you had to change. Okay. So next thing. Let's go to the next thing. Is wealthy people marry because sometimes a lot of wealthy people will marry to make the patriarch or the matriarch happy. So, for example, the matriarch often wants children. They want to look good. They want to look like the royal family, a mini royal. Basically, they want to be a mini royal family. And guess what? If you become a patriarch of a very wealthy family, or you become a matriarch of a very wealthy family, guess what you're probably going to want to do? Guess what? They're not that different. It's the needs. See, no longer a very poor woman in India, in China, I've had many people offer me their daughters. Like, if you could marry my daughter, take her to America, we would give you this land with these coconut trees. I've had many parents come to me and they were like trying to get their daughters married out of need, right? Well, wealthy people don't need the money. What do they want? Need. They, let's say need, okay, because it becomes such a powerful driver, just like sex for a young man. It becomes such a powerful driver that you can call it a need. You can call it a want, it doesn't matter, it's just a word. But I think it gets to that kind of like where humans feel, it's biological, we need something, right? And when you don't need anything, you need something less crucial, So they need social status. And they start wanting to have more control of life and be less at the whims of things. And that's where power comes in. So they start to want to accumulate things that make them look good to other wealthy families, which is grandkids. And, you bring the grandkids to the big dinner and they're in their little ties and they look cute and they're running around the garden and, just doing kid things at the kid table and everything's great. And everybody's laughing, lots of pictures. And they want that mini royal family experience. That's what most wealthy people want. Okay, so, and need. Let's just say need. So that need now trumps the other needs that they would have had if they weren't crusty wealthy. So they do the same thing. So it looks like the same thing to you. Marriage to a upper class person has no resemblance to a lower class person. Let me give you another example. Women that are very wealthy cannot be sluts. Okay, let me repeat that. Women that are very wealthy cannot be sluts. Why is that? The term slut is based on wealth. Why? Because, okay, you ever read the Scarlet Letter? They put a letter A for adulterer on her. And they made her live outside the village for ultimate shame because she broke a social taboo. She had sex with a married woman, or I can't remember if she was married or he was married. Anyway, I think she was single, he was married. I can't remember. But anyway, she was an adulterer. And so she was greatly shamed and thrown out of her village. Okay, so now today we look at that as cruel, but this is the way that society enforced their social mores at the time with men and women. That's what people don't understand. A story is about a person, okay? That doesn't mean there's no other stories. It doesn't mean that this and that. It means the story. And whenever you hear one story, you better get interested and start thinking, I bet there's a lot of other stories that we didn't know. Let's find out about those. Let's not say, well, there's this one poor kid in India. He's very poor. He needs all our money, and we send billions of dollars to this one kid. Because guess what? If there's a poor kid in India, there's a pretty good chance there's another one, right? Okay? Right next to him. And it's probably male or female. It doesn't really matter, right? So one example, this is how we look at history now. There's a book, automatically that means women this. It doesn't. It could mean that. Okay, you got to do research into these things, obviously. Anything could mean anything. You have to look into it. But often, the odds are, is that when there's one person, there's more. Okay. So, there's more examples that you didn't know, and you need to learn to understand the environment. So, we greatly shamed people for not... The adulterer, what that is the common slut of today. That's what we're calling her. We use the term, people use that term and many other terms that women use too, by the way. Women use these terms more than men, I think. In my group circles, I find women using these terms the most. Maybe it's because competition. I don't know. It's not scientific. Maybe there are a number of guys doing it that I'm not counting, and maybe I'm mistaken. But all I know is that it's very common too for my female friends to use these type of words to describe other women. So, what do we have? So, adulterer is the common S word today. Now, what did that mean? That means you were going to be thrown out. And that means you were going to be deprived until you got in line. And they were going to kill the chicken to scare the monkeys, right? And so that is why we did those kind of things, right? So the word slut is a threat. It is the letter A. Let's call it the letter A. The letter A is a threat. We will take away your ability to live in this village. We will take away your ability to get food. We will make it very hard on you if you don't conform to our standards. If you break, like, when you're having intercourse at that age, at that era with a married person, you were disrupting society. And the society's like, no. Society was humans survived because of society. It wasn't individual people. It was people working together. And so this was a key thing. We were very hard on people who didn't work out. The Eskimos used to push people off of icebergs at night when they had sex outside marriage. They would take a guy that was fucking other guys' wives and just push him off. And that was what the elders did in Alaska, because they had to greatly punish that, because that would greatly disrupt their society. And their society was essential for their own survival. So that's why. It wasn't because of sexism, or it was survival. Society needed to stick together, and there needed to be compromises, like the military today. There's military rules. You follow them, not based on logic, but based on orders from above. And it seems dumb, and some very dumb mistakes are made. But at the end of the day, that's why it's still there. That's why armies that are successful do that, is because it's better for the army to all know what they're doing, going in the same direction, and then everybody's just fighting for themselves, and it becomes a free-for-all. People are shooting each other on accident, right? It's craziness, right? So it's not perfect, but it's better. So that's the way society operated. Okay, so rich women. Now imagine the letter A woman was a billionaire. So she was on TV, she had money, she had family, she had friends everywhere. She had a chalet in Switzerland. She had fancy horses and all this stuff. And she had a family, had a huge boat. They'd charter a boat and take her in style over to Switzerland, and everything was great. Would society have been able to shame her? No, because she would just walk away. The only thing she would lose is her friends in that little village. She would just walk away. So the ability, the S word, the A word, all those words are a way to shame somebody with no money. See, that was the or might not be able to eat, survive, right, and reproduce. So they were targeting her main survival mechanisms, her most important survival mechanisms. So, but what if those are covered? So rich girls and rich families, they don't worry if their daughter has sex, because nobody can really take away. Some people can disapprove of her daughter. Okay. Some people can disapprove of Paris Hilton, but does it really matter at the end of the day? She's one of those celebrities that I don't think would have taken this road if she didn't have to, but that tape got leaked. She's not like the Kardashians who did it on purpose. But anyway, she made the best of it, right? She seems like pretty cool, actually. She Hilton family, and she had the sex tape come out, and she was hot, and she turned it into a career, and she does her own thing now. But even for her, who really paid the price, by public, it wasn't just in her village. It was like the whole world had seen her, and her family, I'm sure, turned on her. I didn't read about it, but I'm sure it wasn't easy on them, right? I couldn't say sure, but I mean, I would guess some members of her family were very embarrassed of this. They didn't want the shame on the family. See, that's what the wealthy family doesn't want. They don't want a lot of attention. They don't want shame on the family. Now, a girl having sex with a lot of guys is not the same as being naked in a leaked porn video to millions of people, right? So those are different things, because those individuals are not going to, let's say the village is not going to influence her reputation when she's in Switzerland in her chalet. See, that's what it's all about. See, that's why we do things. The reason why we call girls names, or why we call guys names, is to shame them into fitting in to the current slot that makes the most sense for society at the time. But as a man, what I think is important for you to understand is that you're also a victim of this. And when you can see outside of your class, you'll understand that a lot of things you do, the red pill here, is that a lot of things you do are based on morals that you don't really have, or not even really relevant anymore, right? So women, until now, got married for money. And it wasn't, and survival. Let's just say survival and reproduction. Those were our two core needs. Women got married for those two things, survival and reproduction. Men, guess what? We married for survival and reproduction. Now that is not on the table anymore, you can reproduce. You can go to if you're a woman, you can go to a sperm bank. You can reproduce without a man, pay a few bucks, put up an ad, say you want to get pounded. Go to some bars, get pounded, leave town. You can get pregnant very easily now as a woman, and you don't need a man to get pregnant, or you don't need a traditional marriage to have babies. That's the best way to think about it. So that need is no longer there. So don't expect women to act like they need something when they don't. I'm not saying you like it or that it's good for society. I'm saying don't expect it. It's like if you hand somebody a ton of money on Friday night, okay, somebody who is a partier and they like to have fun and they're like, don't think of the future. Don't expect them to come into work at 12 o'clock when you call them for emergency, because they won't. They don't have the need that night. Right? They got money, they're having fun, they don't have any need. Now you call them when they're hungry and they need cash, guess what? They're going to come drunk from the bar and start working because they need it, okay? And we act on our needs and women act on their needs, okay? Don't shame people for not acting on your needs. They're going to act on their needs, and your understanding of their needs and your needs is what's going to make your life so much better. It's not easy. This is the red pill. It's not an easy journey, but everybody here is, pretty on board with accepting these truths and then just saying, okay, now that I've looked at reality, how does it look? Give yourself time. How does reality look now that I looked at it, right? So I would say that women are not marrying just for the very simple reason that they don't need the money and they don't need you for reproduction. And that will continue. Men cannot marry or marry. You might marry some girl who it could last. When I say marriage, I mean like a lifelong partnership. Okay, I'm not talking about going down the aisle and then getting divorced 3 months later. I'm talking about a lifelong partnerships. Guys might look for that for a woman who needs it. And again, this is not, and some women will say, oh, he had to go there to do that. Listen, a guy has every right to want a loving family. He has every right. If he has to go to a third world to get it, he's got to go there. But I will warn you guys, and I have this experience, if you take a girl in the third world and you make her wealthy, she will often change. Sometimes she won't. So that's where the sweet spot is. Some third world girls they have such a strong family and society, and they really don't want the shame. They don't need you, they realize at some point, but they're like, yeah, I don't need the shame. I'm good. I want things to stay together, and they'll make a decision not to divorce you, right? But their need for you will disappear. And don't underestimate the power of that need in your actions or her actions. Okay? So, are men happy about this? Would men turn back the clock? What should you do? These are things to think about. Is how do you react to this? Take away your anger and just look at the reality. Women don't need you. And if you understand that, and this is what I'll end on, is I always say this, and it's so true for me, and I tell you it can be true for you too. Accepting reality is the easiest way to go. Because when you avoid reality, your subconscious is intelligent enough to remember reality, and it will torture you. You will always be uneasy. When you accept reality without knowing what you're going to do, this is the key thing. Sometimes reality hits you and you don't know what to do yet. Here's the thing, you don't need to know. Just accept reality and trust yourself. Trust yourself. Sometimes it takes time to figure out what to do, how you should react, what you're going to change, what you're going to do, how you're going to look at the world. You might need time for that. Give yourself time. Just take the reality, the cold reality, and accept it. Let it soak in. Just say to yourself, this is real. Women don't need me. They're not bad. They don't need me anymore. Okay? And if they do need me, it's temporary. I might get lucky. The reality is women don't need men anymore. That's a very cold reality. And both for reproduction or for living. Okay? So, when you understand that, it will lead to freedom for you. Because that's my ultimate goal, is that the painful realities, the guideposts we follow in this channel, lead you to true freedom. They have for me. I'm not going to tell you how, but I will tell you this. Have faith. Have faith. There's two roads. There's the real road, and there's the road to nowhere. Take the real road, even if it's scary. Even if you don't know how you're going to react. Even if you don't know what the fuck is going to happen. You're just like, you know what? I'm going to start looking at the world this way and understand that it wasn't gold digging in the old days. It was need. Women needed men. They didn't know they needed men in the way that modern women that, are wealthy now start to. Just like it took me being around wealth to really understand why I was doing things. A lot of women back then, they knew they needed a man, but they didn't understand the whole thing. Now women are starting to understand, like, okay, that woman needs it. She's going to do it, but I don't need it. And there's a lot of drawbacks to my freedom. And I can get my child to do whatever I want. I can move wherever I want. They're like, you know what? I'm going to go solo. And that's what women are choosing to do. No longer live in the fantasy that you control the future. Like a lot of guys are like, when we don't do this, they're going to, hey, it ain't happening. Not only is something uncomfortable happening, but the reaction is the opposite of what you want. Designer babies and more living arrangements that are just situationships and things like that. So, what do? What you do is just turn to your left, look at that scary road of reality, and you walk down that fucking road. And what'll happen is, feel your back letting off fear. As soon as you head down that road, fear will leave you. Because all of your fear was of what would happen if I accepted this. But once you do it, you're like, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, everything didn't fall apart in my life, right? I accepted some reality that wasn't good, I didn't like, and I don't know what's going to happen even now. But it feels better, actually. It just feels better. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you on that. I hope you guys have a good one.